Go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. And as we typically do, we'll start with an invocation. And following the invocation, I'm going to ask Nikki Tuttle, who is a 7th grader at Parkwood Middle School, if she will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Just to give you a little bit of background on Nikki, she has been in 4-H for 5 years. She loves watching the news and learning more about policies and government process. Last year, Nikki attended the North Carolina 4-H Citizenship Focus with her 4-H agent, Crystal Starks. North Carolina 4-H Citizenship Focus provides an opportunity for youth to discover how government impacts their everyday life, how they can impact government in return. She was able to meet with county representatives. In August, she attended the Youth Voice Service sponsored by the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. She is planning to attend North Carolina 4-H Citizenship Focus again this year and hopes to gain more experience and knowledge. When Nikki isn't learning about the government, she's competing on her traveling softball team or volunteering in her community. Nikki, we welcome you, and we look forward to having you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. With that, I'll ask Commissioner Lance Simpson to give our invocation.
You'll join me in prayer, please. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful and respectful discussion. Allow us to grow closer and nurture the bonds of our community, and fill us with your grace as we conduct the county's business. Continue to remind us that all we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of you, and for the service of Union County. Father, we ask that you protect and bless our first responders, military, and their families. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Nikki, if you'll come up here and lead us in the pledge, that'd be great. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, that will take us to employee recognition. We want to recognize these individuals who've had milestone anniversaries with the county, and they would be Mark Helms with the Sheriff's Office and Kenda Griffin with Human Services, both with 5 years. Wendy Sanderson in the Health Department, Jennifer Crumpler in Public Works, Christopher Black in the Sheriff's Office, Sherry Sylvie in the Sheriff's Office, Frida Coley in Human Services, all have 10 years of service. With 15 years of service, we have Elizabeth Miles from the Library, Kimberly Reed from Public Works, Rose Pfeiffer from the Sheriff's Office, and Sheila Gregory with Social Services. And with 20 years of service, we have Monica Smith in Social Services. So we thank them and certainly celebrate those milestones along with them and their families, and thank them for their service to the citizens of Union County. That will take us to our informal comments, which we have no one signed up for. And that will take us to the additions, deletions, and/or adoption of the agenda. And I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you very much. And
Mr. Chairman, we need to remove item number 4. I apologize.
Very good. That is correct. You did tell me that. That's under consent, though, right?
That is correct.
All right. So under consent agenda, we're going to remove item number 4. As on item number 19, we need to add the following wording at the end of section B. So it should read, adopt the ordinance amending the Union County Water Use Ordinance, the Union County Sewer Ordinance, the Union County Water and Sewer Extension Ordinance, and Chapter 34 of the Union County Code to be effective upon execution of the interlocal agreement. With that, I will ask for approval of the consent agenda as amended.
Motion to approve the agenda.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right.
Did we vote on the main agenda?
We just did.
The consent.
We did both. All right. And that will take us to item number 23 under new business.
Sorry, I'm getting there.
Fine. Looks like we have some folks that have,
Yes, sir. This relates to the Board of Equalization and Review. Mark Ashcraft and Dutch Hardinson have both reapplied for reappointment to this board, as well as Mr. Helms has resigned his position, which his term expires in February of 2019, and Randy Adcock has applied, who would, if so approved by the board, to serve the remainder of that term. And there's a memorandum in your packet which indicates that Mark Ashcraft, if appointed by this board, would agree to serve as the chair.
all right.
Motion to reappoint Mr. Ashcraft and Mr. Hardison. Mr. Adcock to fulfill the remaining term for Mr. Helms, and to name Mr. Ashcraft as chairman.
All right, we have a motion. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, none? And that will take us to item number 24.
And yes, Chair and Commissioners, this is a Union County Candidate Intersection List and Funding Program. And Brian, Bjorn, which I don't know which one of you are going to do the presentation. Bjorn, okay.
What's being asked of you tonight is to consider a intersection improvement program for prioritization as different funding sources come available through the North Carolina Department of Transportation and the Metropolitan Planning Organization that covers much of Union County. There have been 3 separate calls for projects that will occur in 2017 and several other submittals requested through the North Carolina Department of Transportation for various pots of money that Union County is eligible to apply for, or to work with municipalities and the NCDOT to have the NCDOT to apply for on our behalf. But we struggle to apply for these projects because we often don't have a prioritized or a predetermined list of projects available, and also these applications often involve local match, and it's a struggle to identify that match in a timely manner. And so what we're proposing is to have a list of projects to work from, to coordinate with the municipalities and NCDOT to apply for, and also to have a pre-approved pot of money on a multi-year basis that's available for the county commission to apply to projects as identified in coordination with the NCDOT and the municipalities as these solicitations come available. We've coordinated with the NCDOT Division 10, which covers our area, regarding these projects and this overall process, and they're very supportive of the proposal. They think that this is the way that a lot of projects are going to go in the future, is coordinating with the municipalities and the counties, and they want to work with us. So what's being asked is for $500,000 over 5 years. These would be in the ballpark of $100,000 per project, but these would be determined more precisely as the grant applications come available, and we coordinate with the municipalities to see how much money they're willing to contribute to these projects. This would be consistent with what several municipalities in the county have recently done on recent applications. Wesley Chapel, Monroe, and Marvin have recently committed match to projects, and we would look to work with communities as they apply for projects where our needs and identified projects overlap. So the projects we're looking to focus on are intersection projects because of the high safety and congestion benefit on a dollar comparison basis. We would rely on NCDOT Division 10 to administer these projects. We would contribute local match commitment up to a set amount, and then the division would administer the projects. We would need to consider the budget of these projects as they're put together to consider the year of expenditure. Some projects might be funded in a matter of months. Others may take several years for the projects to actually become eligible to be implemented, and so we need to worry about the cost inflation of projects depending on what year they're actually funded. We would not look to submit projects on corridors that are expected to be improved in the near future, and for NCDOT and MPO purposes, the near future is up to approximately 1 decade in the future. That affects several sections of Providence Road, NC 84, Monroe, and US 74. And we would want to limit the projects that we focus on to ones that have been identified by previous studies or resolutions, primarily the Union County Transportation Plan, Western Union County Transportation Plan, Critical Intersection Study, and NCDOT spot safety assessments that are recurringly done within the county. So to put some perspective in terms of the improvements that are expected over the next decade within Union County, there's quite a few improvements that are already programmed. These bubbles show the year that construction is expected to begin. The projects that are shown in purple are candidate projects that have been previously submitted for evaluation but are not funded in the next decade. The other projects, particularly 84, 16, Monroe Road, have quite a bit of construction associated with them. So several projects that otherwise would have been considered for this list were excluded because we didn't think it was wise to go after grants to improve intersections that might be torn up in just a handful of years as a part of a larger widening. So the different programs that are available, the first one is STPDA, Surface Transportation Program, Direct Attributable. It's a pot of money that's available to the Charlotte MPO by virtue of being relatively large. Their current solicitation goes through the 3rd week in March. They have a roughly $500,000 advised minimum project cost because of federal dollars that are improved. This is a very flexible pot of money that can be used for a range of multimodal projects. There is a minimum local match, and these projects look at congestion, crash history, how much match is contributed to the projects, as well as consistency with the long-range plan. SPOT 5.0 is the biannual large project evaluation process for the largest pots of money in the state. It identifies a 10-year list of projects. Solicitation is going to occur this summer, and the ranking and points assignment by the MPO and the division will occur in 2018. There's only so many projects that can be submitted within the MPO, so we need to be disciplined with that list. Local match is not required for these projects, but it is incentivized. And this is a holistic look at projects in terms of congestion, crash history, truck traffic, cost, and consistency with the long-range plan. The next pot of money that's available to the MPO is called CMAQ, acronym for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality. It's federal money that's available to the area because we've had a history of ozone issues, although it's recently gotten much better. This money is available for projects that improve the transportation network in terms of congestion, as well as reducing emissions of pollutants. And so you can do projects that improve the network but don't add traditional lane miles of capacity, so you can do intersections but not necessarily a multi-laning of a project. And local match is a big factor here as well. And then the last pot of money that's available, which is administered through the NCDOT and is very flexible and is regularly solicited, is called spot safety. These are for projects that are for safety issues. Congestion is not a variable in the consideration of projects, but high benefit to cost is. The maximum cost that the DOT will fund for a project is $1 million. The local match is not required. It does help. Anything above $1 million, they're going to look for assistance. There were 2 projects that the city of Monroe recently assigned $500,000 to for these candidate projects. It was recently in the newspaper. And the reason why they were asked to put in $500,000 is because the 2 projects were above $1 million each. NCDOT would administer these projects, and the good thing about this program is that every 3 months they solicit new projects, and because they're relatively low cost, they are implemented within 1 to 2 years, so which is a very short time frame for NCDOT projects. So we have 16 projects that are being considered. Some of our larger cost projects may be best only submitted for the SPOT program only, not the spot safety, but the larger SPOT program. We would try and focus our money on a handful of projects where we could coordinate with the municipalities and best leverage these dollars to get projects funded. There are multiple categories of programs, so some projects may work well in some categories and not in others. And this allows us to have more influence on which projects get funded and selected for funding within Union County, and helps create a cooperative environment between municipality, counties, and the municipalities, the county, and the NCDOT. And so what's being asked of you tonight is to commit $100,000 per year for up to 5 years, $500,000 total, and a list of projects for us to then use to work with the NCDOT and the municipalities as these project solicitations come available. And so happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Any questions, gentlemen? Vice Chairman?
Yes, statement through in this item says these 16 items are listed in a generalized priority. So am I understanding that as we go down, those are the most highest priority in the list?
Yes, sir. Taking a holistic look at the projects in terms of the crash history, the amount of truck traffic, the amount of overall congestion, and then moderating that by how much it would cost to make the improvements. Yes, the higher projects are better projects overall than the lower ones, although it depends on which funding category you're comparing them against to say which ones will work better than others.
I can say I'm in agreement to allocate funds. I'd like to think that the board would have control on which projects, and I'll give you an example. You've got North Carolina 84 and Potter Road, and the description is to add turn lanes.
Yes.
There's turn lanes already there now.
Yes. This would be, you could have projects where you're talking about in additional legs of the intersection. Could be talking about extending the length of the storage for them. Could be talking about adding double lanes in certain locations. So the specifics are sometimes not necessarily determined, but that's the recommendations for that specific intersection.
And you keep making reference to the total number of crashes. And for example, your Newtown Road in Billy Howie, do you have data that says crashes have diminished since they put in the four-way stop?
That stop hasn't been in long enough for them to be able to say definitively what the rate is, but they are pleased with the results so far. And that's why that particular intersection is if the four-way stop was not there, that would be a very high priority project. But because the four-way stop is working fairly well right now, they're holding off on applying for any funds to make any turn lane improvements to that intersection because they want to see if the four-way stop will work in the interim. But I do know it's very high. I think it was over 50 for the 5-year period, which is very high compared to the other projects.
I know it was higher. And then Wesley Chapel Road and Rogers Road, we had this conversation. They just finished a major improvement to that intersection. And I think our conversation was that, after 4 or 5 years, it pays for itself. Well, if that's number 2 on the list, we're not going to make a year or two pay, maybe.
The intersection itself regarding Wesley Chapel and Rogers,
Yeah.
the improvements that were made versus the ultimate one, I think the improvements that were recently made were much more interim, and some of these intersections, the improvements you're talking about are in excess of a couple $1 million, so they may have just made interim improvements.
Commissioner Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the way I understand, and this is, for a long time, roads in the county, there's been a big misunderstanding of just how much control we had over roads. And what I see with what you presented to us the other day and what you're telling us here tonight is that if you got $1 million project and it's going to cost $1,050,000, then we could lose the whole project. And for us to be able to put that much in and work with the municipalities or whatever we can do to get those projects rolling instead of losing that funding, sounds like a pretty good idea for us to do. So is that what I'm getting? Is it that we're just compensating for the part over the $1 million instead of losing the project?
For that particular funding source, that would be often the instance where our local money would come to play, because where it's in excess of $1 million, they would like to do the project, but they're limited by that funding source to the $1 million, since they would come to the municipalities in the county to help reduce the cost down to that $1 million limit. Yes, sir.
Can I add to that?
You got $1 million?
I want the board to think that that's the only thing that we're talking about, because
Right.
we're not. Obviously, the goal here is to try and partner with municipalities and get them to fund a portion of these projects as well as the county. Because what we've learned is that while the match may be a minimum of 20%, that's often not enough to make the project rise to the top of being selected. Recently, Wesley Chapel and Marvin committed 20%. Their projects weren't funded. So really what we're trying to do is basically partner and try to get more funding to help some of these projects to be built. That doesn't necessarily apply on that $1 million spot safety. Those are other pots of money where that would come into play.
Brian, it might be helpful to, especially for people watching this, to hear what can the county do? What is the county's role in roads, and what is a municipality? Municipalities have abilities to take care of their own roads and maintain their roads, but the county does not, right? Is it?
We legally, the state has allowed counties to become more involved in roads. In the past, we had actually no ability as far as the law is concerned. However, I am not aware of any county in North Carolina that has taken on road construction, road maintenance. That's traditionally not a county function. That's a municipal function. I don't see that changing in the near future. However, I do think that over time, you're going to see the state start to look to counties to become more involved in funding for road projects. It's just the nature of the limited amount of money there is for these secondary types of roads. So really what we're talking about is the municipalities are in a better position to take on road maintenance. We're really talking about funding improvements. That's what we're talking about. Did that answer your question?
Any other questions? All right. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the identified intersection scale projects with a 5-year commitment for a total of $500,000 to apply towards project match, and authorization to work with municipalities in Union County and the NCDOT to collectively identify projects to submit and support through relevant CRTPO and NCDOT funding programs.
All right, we have a motion, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None? All right, that'll take us to item number 25.
And if Mr. Caton, are you coming up to introduce this item, or is Nina coming up to introduce this item?
Well, we'd allow you to hear from Ms. Meadows, our head librarian, and Ms. Kimberly Boland, with Kimberly Boland Associates, who's going to provide the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. As you know, you all allowed us to apply for a grant to look at the space at the main library. The main library was redesigned in the early 2000s, and it hasn't been touched since then. So our goal with applying for this planning grant was to make our space as flexible as possible. And so we found a consultant to do that, and this is Kimberly Boland. We selected Kimberly Boland and Associates to head up our planning process, and so she's here tonight to present her process and ultimately her findings. I'll turn it over to her.
Good evening. I know that you've seen some of these slides already, but I thought it would be helpful for me to be here in person to answer any questions that you might have, and kind of just go through the process a little bit and show you the results of our findings and our recommendations. We spent the last few months working with the library administration to do a full assessment of the existing Monroe Library facility, and also working with the public. We did several stakeholder sessions, which I'll review with you briefly, as well as an online survey to actually talk to the community to find out what they're looking for in their 21st century library. As many of you know, libraries have changed dramatically, even over the last 5 to 10 years. They're constantly evolving, and so I think as a consultant who works with libraries all across the country, it's important to find out what the community wants and values before you go off trying to design something that you think they might want. So we've taken all the information that we've gathered over the last few months and put it into recommendation, floor plan, some written recommendations, phasing, working with the library to create a budget that really explores an option that's fiscally responsible, flexible, and meets the needs of the community. So as I mentioned, one of the first things that we do that is extremely critical is in November we were here for several days. We met with 144 people in the community personally to conducted 12 sessions. We talked to business leaders, teenagers, the staff, library board, people from all over the community, different elements and different views. We actually met with people that use the library as well as people that haven't set foot in the library for years, which is an interesting perspective to find out why aren't they using their public library. So I think in general we found out no matter if you're a user or not, libraries are still important to people. They feel they're a valuable part of their community for whatever reason. I think it was very interesting that a lot of people talked about other libraries in North Carolina or in other places that they lived, and them really loving the customer service at Union County and wanting the decor, the physical feeling when they go in the library to match that warmth. Right now, very institutional, sterile, not a lot of elements physically that you would see in a 21st century library. And I think those were the two things that kept resonating throughout the discussions with people. So my colleagues and I basically, we went through all of the stakeholder session input. We sussed out probably the 10 key things that people really value that they're looking for. Service point adjustment, which is pretty common in today's libraries, quiet spaces versus active spaces, which I think is sometimes an eye-opener to people because traditionally libraries are very quiet. They're not quiet anymore, but people still want quiet spaces, but they do need places to do group work and conduct business, tutoring, and so on. Variety of seating, having more comfortable seating, again, that goes back to the comfort. People having difficulty maybe finding things in the library and wanting better access so they can help themselves to the collection that's already there, which is a good thing because we spend money on books, media, and other things, and we want people to use those. So having better wayfinding and such, and more access to technology, not just computers, but things that libraries are doing now with digital creativity and virtual reality and that type of thing. So those were kind of the key things that came out. And then what we did to supplement the public sessions is we did an online survey, a supplemental online survey. So anyone that couldn't attend the sessions or anyone that wanted to give additional feedback could. And we polled about 272 people on that survey. And again, very good feedback. We had 10% of our respondents were infrequent to non-frequent users, and actually that's really high. For that, we're usually lucky if we see 3 to 4%, and so I felt really good that we were getting a well-balanced response. And again, people they felt the library as a community hub that came through. The technology, the tradition, and balancing that, but a lot of the same things came through that we were hearing in the public session. I put this slide together just in case you were interested in where some of the people were coming from that responded to the survey. You can see here there's a range of zip codes that responded, with the highest one being the 28110 zip code. You can see the balance of non-users versus users that responded. And then another chart that shows the frequency of users versus non-users. One thing that was interesting, of the top 5, we tallied a lot of different things, asking people what they wanted, what they didn't want. And I think there was like some 20-some different things people rated, and the library has those findings. But the top 5 things that came up that are in this chart here, what's interesting about them is that there were the top 5 space needs wanted by people that use a library all the time and people that don't use a library or would like to use a library if we made these improvements. So that they came through over and over. So when we developed our facility plan and layout, we focused on these 5 things, knowing that these were critical to people in this community. Also, I think it's important for you to know, with the library, the Monroe Library as it stands, currently the whole Union County Public Library is well below state and national average in square footage. The libraries are very small compared to what a typical public library today would be. So if you see the first bullet point is the North Carolina average for square foot per capita is a 0.6. U.S. is average at 0.65. Best standards are 1 square foot per capita, and currently Union County is only at 0.31 square feet. Now, with the expansion of WACSA, they would gain to 0.46, but still below state standards. So that tells me that even with WACSA, in knowing what we learned about Monroe during our assessment, the Monroe Library is also undersized for what it should be. We also did an evaluation. We looked at things, evaluated them on good, fair, inadequate, and poor. The things that are inadequate to poor are in this bullet list: power, children's area being too small, children's area being one of the most things that's important to this community. That was high in the list. And also very small, parking, and some other things that we took into account, obviously, when we were creating the plan. Another assessment, just to kind of give you kind of the lay of the land with today's public libraries, shows that we did a full facility assessment looking at the library. If we did a reconfiguration, redesign, what's the size that the library should be? And it is currently undersized by 22,000 square feet. So our recommendations to keep within the goal of trying to be budget conscious and cost effective for this community, we looked at keeping the existing footprint and reworking it to be what the community wants. And instead of, we know 22,000 square feet, where is that going to come from? And it's not an inexpensive venture. So our recommendations basically stop at just looking at the existing footprint of the building and then focusing on these bullet points based on things that the public said. So the collection and the shelving, quiet versus active spaces, changing the service points out because they're very large. If we reduce them, we create more public space, which is good. Updating the decor, making sure there's a focus on technology and technology literacy for this community, which is very important, and doing some reworking of the staff areas to make more public space. So consolidating staff to open up some of the existing staff spaces to create additional public areas that are in need. So this is our recommended floor plan, and basically what it involves is again, a reworking of existing spaces, a creation on the far right-hand side of a new youth actual program or youth area that would be separate from the rest of the library that would best serve ages 0 through 12 and creating more program space for that age group. But separating, currently it's not separated, that causes issues with quiet versus active for all ages, also security for little ones running around. So lots of issues. So by separating off, it improves the situation all the way around. We put more emphasis on getting the stacks, the collection right in front of the public so they can easily get the materials and hopefully increase circulation and get things out into their hands. And then creating areas for technology. There's a STEAM space that area, so focusing on technology education for the public. And lots of seating areas, lots of small meeting spaces, and more variety of seating to accommodate the user's needs. And a recommendation as well to power the library as much as possible using an affordable solution that goes under the carpet instead of doing expensive core drilling and things like that would be an outrageous cost to the county. Looking at affordable solutions to extend power, because that was one of the priorities for the community. And the last deliverable that we've provided the library with is recommendations for the furnishings and how things that we can buy cost effectively that will be flexible into the future, that will allow the library to be able to reconfigure the library as needs change over the years, so it's not stagnant. They don't have to do any redesign again. They can simply do it themselves and not spend a lot of extra money down the road. And that is my last slide, if you have any questions.
Any questions, gentlemen? Commissioner Russell?
Thank you. In your assessment of the counties and where Union County ranks in funding or whatever for libraries, the other counties, nothing was taken into account of the public libraries or the libraries in the public schools. That's not included because we have about 50 schools and each with a library. So when you say that
When you benchmark against other public libraries, even that the school libraries aren't.
they're not included.
They're not included,
Okay.
no, because they don't serve the full community.
Right.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Ms. Bowman. We appreciate it. That will take us to the county manager's comments.
And I have no comments this evening.
Very good. Commissioner Jerry Simpson,
No comments.
Commissioner Stoney Rushing,
No comment.
Commissioner Lance Simpson,
No comments.
Vice Chairman Richard Helms.
Ms. Tuttle, thank you very much for being with us. It was great seeing you again. And Ms. James, thank you for being with us again tonight. I do want to congratulate Crystal Krupp, our Register of Deeds. She and Brian got married Friday, had a beautiful wedding and reception, and they're on their honeymoon. I wish them the very best. And that's all.
All right. And I have no comments. With that, we'll stand adjourned.